Hey everybody, welcome to the State DOT Roundtable at the CTA Expo. My name is Richard Price, and I'm your Senior Program Specialist for MTAP. Here's my contact information in case anything goes wrong, because things always go wrong. But let's get started, and what I'd like to do is start by taking, actually before we take the roll, I want to ask people who are on the phone, you're kind of my eyes and ears in this case, because this is our first time using this kind of, second time using this method. I'm hoping you're able to hear us, but I already see that people have raised their hands on the phone, and maybe can't hear us, but the idea is, if you can't hear us on the phone, let me know, and we'll try to speak into the microphones as best as we possibly can, but again, use the raise your hand function, use the chat box to let us know what's going on. We're just going to keep rolling through this. In the meantime, I'm going to turn it over to Charles Carr and let him get started with the State DOT Roundtable. Thank you.
Thanks, Richard. We appreciate you taking the time to be here today. This is one of those sessions that is in a little context. We started this probably 15 years ago as a way to make sure that we could take advantage of MTA's involvement, our state DOT involvement, but the transit provider involvement as well. And as it is involved, most of the providers indicated that we've got a ton of sessions and training that we really want to go to. And I hear from my DOT when I'm back home, so we really don't want to come to the state DOT roundtable. That's how we ended up with the MTA folks and the transit DOT officers from the various DOT meeting together. Today, it's an opportunity for us to have some very candid discussions. This is not we've never taken a got-you approach. This is not a time to grind the axe, but it is to ask questions and to make an observation. We're going to follow our agenda as we've got it printed. We're going to take a roll call in just a few minutes. But we're going to make sure that everyone knows who's sitting around the table. And again, the success of the round table has always been the interaction of the folks in the room. It's nothing worse than having that glass overlook after about 35 minutes of hearing 4 PowerPoints. And I know I had a question, but I didn't get a chance to answer. So we really want the kind of interaction. I think that works with FTA as well as us, right, Bruce? You know, Dave? And again, it's a chance to interact. There are a lot of exciting things going on, but there are a lot of potential opportunities for us to do some really great things. I think we from Mississippi riding kind of high with the announcement of the money yesterday. Everyone gets excited when there's grant money. And hopefully we'll have some more of those things. I look forward to having a discussion about research because we think there's some really good research agenda, some really good research topics on the agenda. So if you can't hear me very well, I'm still trying to deal with whatever this is. Everyone's giving me a diagnosis. And twice as many people have given me their version of here's what will help. After about 3 of those, here's what will help, I decided to just kind of back off. For most of the day, you really want to be aware that you're where you are. Some of the stuff, it can really take you out there. Let's start with introductions of everyone.
So we go on the table, starting right here. Microphone on. Pass it down.
Rachel Old, the Virginia Department of Rail and Public Transportation.
Yes, can you hear that? Can you hear it? Okay.
Emily Delra, Virginia Department of Rail and Public Transportation.
Graham Dollarhide, Nevada Department of Transportation.
Frank Bond. I have people on the phone. Project a little. Project.
Frank Bond, Nebraska Department of Transportation.
Emily Dukoch, Tennessee Department of Transportation.
Robbie Charles, RLS and Associates, and I think we provide technical assistance to 36 different states.
Laura Brown with RLS Associates.
Eric Perez with
Mexico DOT.
Deborah Fox, New Mexico DOT.
Stephanie Beauchamp, Panther International.
Velvet Bus-America Dispatcher from Transportation Research Board. Andy Brush of Michigan Department of Transportation. Carrie Cooper, Illinois Department of Transportation. Charlotte Wilson, Mississippi DOT.
Roderick Bailey, Mississippi DOT.
Jimmy Ferguson, Mississippi Department of Transportation.
Robin Phillips, National Archive.
Charlie Jacobson, CCAA. Don Chartok, Washington State DOT.
Wendy King, Caltrans.
Bruce Robinson, FTA. David Schilling, FTA.
And Diane King with Milligan and Company and FDA.
Great. Thank you. And for everybody on the phone, just so you know, and on the there's all the presentations and all the material handouts that are here in the room are uploaded to the GoToWebinar website, so you should have that and you can pull the material down. And I'm actually going to go down, actually they can't announce themselves, I'm going to announce who we have on the phone. We have Brody Ayers from Colorado DOT, Dave Jacobs from Montana DOT, Frank Nevitt from Caltrans, Greg Nation from Arkansas DOT, Jill Dusenberry from Arizona DOT, Juanita Risch from Idaho Transportation Department, Mark Sprick from Texas DOT, and Victoria Nill from Minnesota DOT. So we have a good group.
I don't think we missed anyone. Okay, we're going to move right along. It doesn't take a lot to fill up the time period that we have. And again, we don't want to spend a lot of time with just looking at a PowerPoint and just, we want to have that kind of interaction. So as we go forward, whenever there's a question, whenever there's an observation, the one thing that we ask for, we don't want anything thrown. And please do not take anything personal. Those are two rounds. We're going to bring up now Don Chardock, who's vice chair of our phone.
Can I do it from here?
Yes, you can.
Okay. So, hey, as the piece of paper says, I'm the vice chair of MTAP, and so I wanted to welcome everyone here and on the phone. I'm going to say, you can hear some common themes from what Charles just said. This is a great opportunity because all the people in this room are struggling with and working on the same stuff. And it's a great peer-to-peer opportunity for us to kind of wrestle with those things together and come up with some common solutions. I look forward to each one of these opportunities as they come up. You know, and I saw a handout after today. I'll look forward to the FDA-hosted summer conference, partnerships conference, and then even looking further forward to the MTAP winter meeting. One of the things I'd like you all to be thinking about, you see my name at the top of this agenda, I'm also going to be on at the end. What are you and your staff's training needs? And so one of the things that we've been discussing is there a gap? And is there something MTAP can do to help fill that gap? But now that I prompted you to think about that in the back of your brains, we'll move on. And I wanted to thank Wendy and Caltrans for arranging this mild weather. It's terrific. And I'm hoping she can do something about the clouds rolling in. Can you take care of that?
All right, I'm Wendy King. I am from Caltrans, the Division of Rail and Transportation. I am the new office chief of our Transit Grants and Contracts office. And no, I'm sorry, I can't take credit for Heather. I have been doing this now for about 2 months. I've been with Caltrans in the transit arena for several years now, but I was working on some specific state funding programs. So a lot of this FTA rules and regulations are all brand new to me. So I'm very excited to be here to just jump right in and hear everything that's going on. So we have a couple of exciting things going on in California right now. A couple of years ago, we had Senate Bill 1 passed, which provided a lot of money for us. And as part of that, we are looking at some specific programs. One in particular is looking at how to do an integrated travel ticketing to where we can have all of our transit and rail partners in one fare collection system. We are hoping to have a pilot for this up by 2020, and then a couple years later have everybody jump on board with it. And then another big hot topic for us is we have this innovative clean transit ruling where we are trying to go all electric in just a short few gonna be a big challenge for us, because we have so many rural agencies, and how are we gonna have the infrastructure for them available, or the funding for them to build that, so that they can charge all these new electric vehicles. Those are the big things going up, and thank you, everybody.
I think what we're gonna, and I forgot one of the basic housekeeping, because I should have just taken odds on how many times someone's phone would have gone off. And before we ask folks, please turn your phones on vibrate. It usually happens. The observation that you just made about having all the transit providers, so you got a single ticket mechanism. Is that something that that you, including the intercity bus market with? Because there's a research project that's been proposed that would look at how we can further the interrelationship between rural transit operators and interstate bus operators. That there seems to still be a divide on, particularly fare mediums and those kind of things, seem to be some of the things that industry pushes back from. So I'd be interested in talking about that a little bit more. Thank you. Okay. Charlie Dixon, Deputy Director of CTAA. Let's give them your spiel, Charlie.
Okay, I will give you my spiel, Charles, but I just want to say, first of all, thank you all for being here with us in Palm Springs. I know that's tough duty, but I'm so glad that everybody came out, and thank you all for all of your support, the Transportation Association and our expo. We really do appreciate it, and I think normally at this point, you would actually be hearing from our executive director, Scott Bogren, and Scott would almost do anything not to miss this session, but his son actually graduated from college today, and so sorry you guys lost out to that, but I think you'll probably forgive him. So anyway, let me on his behalf, again, welcome everybody here, and hope that you have a great session. I'm just going to briefly run through some of the things that we're working on, some of the policies that our board of directors have set, and Charles is a member of our board of directors as well. And, I think, for our part, we represent, rural transit agencies and small urban transit agencies, and, people that provide mobility in cities of all sizes. So I think that our legislative priorities probably are pretty parallel to what you're working on. So I'm going to run through some of the things that we're looking at. Be happy to hear your ideas on this. If there's something that you think is missing, please let us know. But I'll briefly talk a little bit about what we're going on. I might have to do it from up there because this doesn't seem to be working. Yeah, is the clicker working? The clicker does not seem to be working. Why would it? Okay.
Not on the slide, don't worry.
I think it might be your computer. Okay. You want to be my clicker?
I'll be your clicker.
Okay, nice.
Just say next slide.
Okay. So, these are the priorities that our board of directors have set for staff to work on for this year and probably into next year as well. You'll see the number one thing is continued growth for bus and bus facilities programs. We've been really pleased with our ability to get funding for those programs, almost doubled since about 2012, 2013. We are continuing to work on on-demand mobility for rural communities. I was just talking to Charles before we started about a project that we're working on in Tupelo, Mississippi, where we're going to hopefully help them transition their system to an on-demand system. Closer. Regulations. This is something something that we hear about from our members all the time, and I'm sure that, you folks as well have issues with that. We understand, that with funding comes regulations, but we just want to make sure that the regulations are right size. One size does not fit all, and, we had some success on safety regulations with that, and we just want to continue working with our partners at FTA to make sure that the regulations that come out on funding and other things work for everybody. One of the things that we hear about all the time from our members is the Medicaid program, and I understand that this is the State DOT Roundtable, not the State Medicaid Directors Roundtable, but I know that that's something that you guys work on as well. I don't know if anybody was at the Pechacucha last night, but we had believe it or not, a rousing presentation on the 2020 census, and that's something that we will be working on. And one of the things that we've worked on since Katrina is doing something to alleviate the need for local match when a natural disaster has been declared. So that's something we're working on. Next slide. I don't think I need to go through this with you, about the process that we're going through with authorization. So next slide. This is the funding that was available for 2019 for appropriations, and pretty much followed FAST Act authorized levels, and we were able to get an additional $350 million in the appropriations for bus and bus facilities. So again, for us, that's a dramatic success. Next slide. So here you see the 2019 spending levels, the authorized levels, the Trump budget request, and congressional appropriations. You'll see that there's sort of a meme going around about the fact that this administration, is anti-transit. For our programs, 5311, 5310 programs, that's not the case. If you're interested in large capital improvement projects, that definitely is the case. Next slide. So these are the 2020 spending proposals from FAST Act authorization and from Trump budget request. You can see again for bus and bus facilities, the Trump budget actually is asking for more than is authorized in the FAST Act. Next slide. So what we're looking for 2020 approach, obviously the government shutdown impacted the appropriations process, so that is something that we're working on right now, but what we're looking for is just to make sure that the FAST Act authorizations are adhered to, and we want to continue to increase funding for the 5339 program. So going forward, next slide, sorry. Going forward, what we're looking at, for the next authorization that's coming up is, how that's going to be paid for. Obviously, the federal fuel tax is a dwindling resource. Congress keeps inventing interesting ways to pay for the program. At some point, we're going to have to look at another way to do that. What we're looking at now is, for the next authorization, is keeping the gas tax, hopefully an increased gas tax, who knows, but that hopefully during this authorization we can look at switching to an improved funding methodology. Next slide. A bunch of other things that we, again, are looking at for reauthorization that suburban members, so we're looking at increasing the percentage for stick, and just, some other things that we're looking for in terms of authorization. Next slide. So I talked about the growth in the 5339 program. Moving on, next slide. We've talked a lot with our members about, increasing on-demand capability. I think it's very interesting. I think we heard from Lawrence Skyver here at Sunline yesterday, and from our speaker this morning. There's no reason why the folks who are out there operating transit programs can't become part of this mobility on-demand program. It doesn't all have to be ceded to the private companies, that, our folks should be out there thinking about ways to do that as well, and we're definitely working with folks at this time to do that. Next slide. Again, right-size regulations, definitely something that we've heard about from our members, and definitely something that we want to keep working with you folks on, making sure that the regulations that we have to follow work for both the administration, but also for the folks that have to implement them. Next slide. This is hard to read, but again, one of the things that we've been working on, we had a session earlier this week on non-emergency medical transportation. We're really concerned about some of the directions that this is going. We've recently been able to have some dialogue with our friends at CMS on this issue. Some people might have heard that CMS actually had a proposal out that would move non-emergency medical transportation into an optional service that the states had to provide. We've been assured that for right now, that's off the table, but, things can change. But, I think that immediate threat is gone, but it's still something that we will be working on. So that's my brief presentation on sort of what we've been working on policy issues. Be welcome for any questions or discussion. Once again, thanks everybody for being here.
Can we go back to your first slide?
All the way back?
Yeah, on your legislative priorities.
Yes.
The list of priorities.
Yeah.
Want to go back to that slide?
Yeah.
Number 2.
Yeah, it'd be of interest to see if, from those that are sitting in the room, do these mirror the legislative priorities that your state, your transit associations, and your state agencies feel are the ones that are out front? Because oftentimes we hear about this and we just nod, but we're interested to see how far this really, and I think it's going to be important that there will be some people other than CTA as well. Most of us that are DOT employees, we can't carry the water when it comes to working through the legislative process, but we can work with our transit associations to help carry the water on these things, and that's going to be absolutely necessary. Are there any other suggested legislative issues that you see as maybe not a top priority, but it's not quite listed in what we've got up here?
I have one thing, probably maybe a pipe dream, I don't know, but when you talk about the local match, personally in Kentucky, every time I get a call from a county or a city mayor, local official that wants transit in their area, that's where it usually ends. Is when I talking about $5311, and I'm saying, yeah, I can provide you $100,000, but you got to match it up $100,000 yourself, 50-50 match. That's usually where it ends. And so, in my opinion, the rich get richer and the poor get poorer when you consider counties and those that have jobs and factories and businesses there, and then the ones that are more economically depressed, like in the Appalachian areas and those things. And so that's a real barrier as far as our go and making sure we have transportation everywhere in the state. So I would love to see that, obviously, 100%, but if we could get to 75, 80, somewhere in there, maybe just the rural areas or aspiration areas or something.
Well, as an observation, that's an interesting observation, because there is a research project that's well underway through MTAP, that we are looking at compiling, information, we call it best practices, but case studies on, innovative uses of other match sources. Even, I think one of the things that's been overlooked for years is in-kind for match purposes. There are some folks who say that they've been able to come up with some very creative ways to do this. And we wanted to collect that information and make it available to all of us so that we could take that out into the field and have you thought about this? We hope to have a guidebook on how you calculate. And one of the things that we run into historically with, I think used to be with our aging money at one time, the aging population through DHS, the aging administration through DHS, didn't want us to use aging dollars, 3B dollars, to match. You just simply can't do it, because there was never anything written in their legislation that says thou shall do it. They were very hesitant to do it. We find more folks have been finding ways to do that than not. And those are the kind of things we think we can bring some light to this kind of issue. Does anyone else have something like that in mind?
I have a question.
Yes.
This is Bruce Robinson. I have a question on the last priority, which is related to eliminating the local match in the event of a disaster. So under our current authority, the secretary does have the authority to waive the local match in the event of a disaster for the emergency relief funds, if those are appropriated, but also for the 5307 or 5311 funds that the recipient already has. So I don't know if your proposal is something, I mean, and what we do is we establish an emergency relief docket that recipients can apply to ask for any waiver of, they can ask to request to waive the local match, or they can ask to request another provision that the administration has the authority to waive as part of the emergency relief docket. So it is a decision that the secretary or FJ would make. It's not automatic, but I guess my question is the proposal something different than that?
Yeah, I think Bruce thinks that the proposal is actually to make it automatic. That would go hand in hand with the declaration of a natural disaster.
Okay.
Yes.
Graham Dollarhide, Nevada DOT. Something to add to this list maybe would be, you've got it as, I don't know if those are ranked, those priorities, but.
I don't think so. Well, I will say, growth in bus and bus facilities will always be number one, but other than that, I don't think there's any specific rank.
So you've got that as on the top, and you're saying it's number one. We've actually got more than we can spend, and we were trying to work with our regional MTA rep to try to find some sort of loophole where we can flex or transfer that money into 5311. You know, because we need to operate. Yeah, we need to. I mean, we've taken full advantage of the sliding scale for match with those funds, and we're giving 95.5, and still we can't spend it all. So we actually have the opposite problem.
Well,
I was going to say.
I'm sure some of your colleagues could help you out there.
Or are you going to do a way for us to trade, you know, capital money?
That's a question for Bruce. So.
Any kind of way we can transfer that across jurisdictional lines would be really beneficial, because some of us could use more, but I understand.
Right. Yeah, I imagine not everybody's priorities are exactly the same 1, 2, 3, 4, you know, so if there were some more flexibility with not even just those funds, but any fund.
Well, this is just part of the discussion we wanted to get started, and the only other comment I'm going to make on this list up here, we talk about regulations, and people's eyes light up sometimes when we say regulations, but the key is we have got to be definitive in what we're talking about when we're talking about right-sizing regulations. First, we have to look at what the regulations really are and why they are there, and not just offer, I don't like the regulations. We have to have something constructive and rational
work?
Phillips, and I am the Executive Director of National RTAP. And I'm based in Washington DC, but we get around. I know many of you, and it's great to see you all here and to have a chance to meet others of you who I haven't.
Bob, use the microphone, please.
Okay, yes, I'm right here.
You're gonna stand, why don't you go up there? Yeah.
I think I can.
Come up here, there's a microphone here.
Okay. And, oh.
And it hurts.
It hurts. Oh, it's so lovely.
Yeah, closer.
So I'm just gonna run through a bunch of stuff, sort of Testacusa style, so that, you can, Richard said he put the slides on the,
Super fast.
yeah, on the email, onto your site, so you have access to them and you can get into the depths of all this stuff. But there's a lot of cool things happening, and I wanted to discuss these updates that are happening in different parts of our program, what we're doing. Oh, and could you pass, I have the.
Want me to pass these out?
Yeah, that'd be great. They just get split up and put around. So, we've been updating all our tech briefs, so things that if you're searching for stuff and you're looking for a place to start, we have planning tech briefs, we have just about everything. But the new ones are, the guidance for rural transit agencies during a government shutdown, volunteers in transportation, plain language, and what transit agencies need to inform the public about. Because sometimes people are like, well, when do I have to have a public meeting? When do I have to bring the public into the discussion about, I mean, sometimes if you're switching what you're spending your grant money on, you have to do it. So this is a tech brief on that. This is also done by our research librarian who will answer like the most bizarre questions, the most arcane, the harder to find, and more she loves it. And we get talked to a lot. So we get product out. We really, actually our resource center is being used so much that we're bringing in another part-time person to help our person who does the shipping and do it. So it's pretty amazing. And we also try to be wherever people are. So we're really looking for ways that we can, sort of like catch one of those nets so that wherever people are looking, we can be visible to them, whether it's online, on Twitter, on Facebook. And then we've moved our webinars to YouTube. So you can search our YouTube database for keywords and find webinars available with national experts. And people ask us questions all over the U.S. People ask us questions. It sort of shows New York and Massachusetts are really into talking to us. But Washington State, Tennessee, Texas, North Carolina, they all spend a lot of time talking to us too. Some other people could talk to us more. People in Idaho maybe, or Missouri. And a lot of people visit our website. And our website is a portal to resources. So that's a place where you can download things, you can order trainings, you can get a website, you can literally, we have a website builder. We can help your agency put information into GIS so that it can be visible on Google Transit, which every agency with a fit-out should be. I say that's such a common statement. I say that because 5 years ago, 10 years ago, the Yellow Pages meant a lot. Now not so much. So where do people look for information about transit? How hard is it to find transit at any given town in your state? And we want to make it easy. We want to help you help your system make it easy. And so we have website builders, we host websites, we just updated our CRM in that, and so it's really easy to put together a website with a lot of really cool features. And so if you are running into this, send them our way. We have technical assistance. Neil runs our LMS, so learning management system, online training for your operators, for your teams. It's a great way for your program managers to get updated about their program. It's accessible anywhere where you have web access. So any internet-enabled device. So this is a bunch of stuff. We have almost 10,000 people signed up that are drivers or users. And we also just added the bottle human trafficking, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that later. And we also just did a set of Spanish language 2-point cards. So that's training for your drivers who maybe their first language is Spanish. Because it's important people understand the information, not that they understand it completely in English. We want them to understand how to manage local intelligence. We are getting more and more activity. This is sort of showing that our most popular, of course, e-learning is substance abuse awareness, because everybody has to do it. But we have had it out for a little over a year, and so the use of that is not increasing because we basically we're getting to the point of what is the turnover in new drivers and new safety center employees instead of that initial people who hadn't done it and needed to do it. So it's really going. START, which is safety training for rural transit programs, and that you can do by module. That has a distracted driving module in it. So if you're trying to work on your safety culture, these tools are great for helping you work on your safety culture within your program. You can assign them and see whether people have done them before meetings, safety meetings. This is for you to help your people in the system. So this is what I'm talking about, the substance abuse. Over 1,500 certificates have been awarded, and there's 2,000 in progress. This is the new reasonable suspicion, 60 minutes on the effects and consequences, 60 minutes on drugs and then alcohol, and then how to do reasonable suspicion referrals. There are videos. We did this with Cutter and Diana Bird. And then bottle, which is busting on the lookout, and in some states, California, have required safety or human trafficking training. I believe Kansas has also implemented human trafficking training requirements. If your state is considering that, this is this is a certified program started by the Trucking Association. And we have it on our e-learning, so anyone can access it. But you can see people have. It also provides a certificate from the model executive and from me saying that I say, yay, this is good, you've done it. And with our trainings, we're able to track things. And I feel like this is really important. I know you heard Kristen talk about it, but so many things that happen in the community, the drivers that are doing public transit see it, but they can't do about it. They're not able to take a step and make change or support their community as much as they would like to, or they're just taking passing. What are you going to do about addiction except drive people around to treatment? But they have the human trafficking is one where drivers can see things and say things, and they know who's on their bus. So it's really we want to help this in where we can. We're updating our emergency procedures and customer-driven service to be more interactive in the e-learning. And the thing about the e-learning program is that it really assists people learn in different modalities. Some people can read stuff and that's fine. Some people have to be thinking and applying to get it, and some people need more visual. So I think the e-learning program allows us to support training in more modalities. And it does not take the place of Robbie. But Robbie is not going to come out and train like our drivers every year. She is, this is something that, when you onboard someone, before someone has a chance to get out to CTAA or get out to some of the other training opportunities, then this is a chance to get them oriented in the new environment they're working in. We just finished the update on our transit management toolkit, and that is much more interactive, and it's going through a process of being tagged for 508 compliance, and so that it can be green-lit. And we're in the process of letting out the updates of the ADA toolkit, and we hope this fall to start the transit toolkit. There's some really interesting things that are coming up as the federal transit program matures, and how to help people work with tribes, if you're a non-tribal entity, because it isn't just like your next door neighbor, your neighboring county. There is a lot of difference, and recognizing that to help people potentially have more successful partnerships. And so the direct technical assistance, this past year, a lot of it has been focused on answering fairly detailed, tough to answer people, being at conferences and answering questions there and working with people, but also connecting with many of at the federal level, with many of the agencies that don't seem to understand how to work with your transit agencies at the local level, and helping CDC, SAMHSA, HHS, I did a tribal TANF presentation on working with tribes and transit, and CDC with HOP, which has to do with rural obesity counties, high obesity counties, and REACH, which is about getting fresh food in rural areas where there may be only a quickie mart in the grocery store, and how do people access fresh food and good food when they are isolated in rural areas. And a lot of times it's just very much about how do I find it? And you think about people who aren't transit, and they think, well, I walk out my door and I don't see a bus. Well, of course you don't. I mean, it might be there, but you better walk out at the right moment to see it. Or how do you, if you're a program like that, how do you work with that program to make sure that your client's needs are integrated and considered as that system is built, or as that system is revived. So they really have been trying to get them engaged with the idea of actually working with us on coordinated human service and transportation plans. I mean, truly, after 20 years, maybe people will think it's okay. But and I think they really are getting into it. Like I've done 2 with CDC. One was at the national their program stuff, and this last one was with their project people. And I thought that was really good. I've been working with the opioid campaign with USDA and the Health and Human Services interagency group, and engaging with how do we bring transit into that discussion to support the opioid response. And we did a on-the-ground workshop in Lewisburg, West Virginia last fall with 80 people that were basically from the treatment community and justice community. Justice-affected community. And so we're looking at ways, and they are trying to figure out ways that we can integrate that transportation discussion, because no one can implement their dreams or achieve them without access to resources to help them do that. And one of the big issues, and all of these agencies recognize this, is that a big piece of us is the indicators, the social indicators of health. We need to be looking at how to build capacity in our communities and build relationships between parts of the community to support people achieving their dreams and seeing a path to seeing their potential, creating and producing in their communities. And we can't do that as transit providers or in any other single agency. We have to look for ways we can work together. So that's what a lot of what I've been working on, and working with Marianne on, is trying to figure out ways that we can be visible and at the table to help the solutions work, because we're not going to achieve that either without transportation. And then on the other part of this is we've been directly connecting with FTA region offices and the tribal liaisons to get a better picture of what kind of tribal training needs are out there. And I think that that's been actually doing really well. We've worked very directly with Region 8. And on our last tribal roundtable peer call, we had one of, I think it was the Region 6 tribal liaison on. So we're going to work on that in the coming year. We are upgrading our website too. This is our new CRM CMR, Content Management System, CMS. This is what the new, let's see. So this is our new, web builder. So this is an example of what the website builder is that we have for your systems or your state RTAC program. This is our old, if you haven't been there, you should check it out. I think we're gonna have it there for a little while longer. And these are the things that we've been doing, recent webinars, connecting with people. We have, launched a cost allocation tool that will help your, if you want to work with other agencies, you have to know what you're selling them and how much it costs. So the cost allocation tool allows your system or your program to put in the information, for the cost, and then it will show you, you can identify how much a route costs. So if you get an organization that says, hey, we want a new route out here, you say, okay, this is how much it costs. How do you want to help us? Because it's not magic. It's just hard work, and it's also money. So people need to understand that things are, transit costs the same as if they, as any private transportation. It's just how we allocate the cost. And that gets into one of my other things. Never talk to people that aren't transit about fares. Talk to them about co-pays. Co-pays, because as soon as you say copay, you understand you're not paying the whole thing. And that's one of the big issues in trying to partner with other agencies, is they think, well, your fare is only blah, 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 why should we pay more? Well, because it costs a whole lot more. And so if you want to get in and get involved and have us do more, then we have to help people understand what that is, and so they can value it appropriately. We just updated our how to buy vehicles. It really is important for, many states don't have state, procurement, and this helps people deal with that. This is more information about the cost, two variable cost allocation, tool. It works for demand response and fixed route. So you could actually do the cost that you spend on doing Medicaid transportation versus your general public demand response and see if there were differences. You can do it with your fixed route and your demand response. So it's a way for you to really get a different perspective on the cost of the service. And then it spits out all sorts of great performance measures, which we all love now that we have CAM plans. And there's a webinar out there for you to look at, and so you can test it out, see whether it's something you're more interested in on our YouTube site. These are some of the updating things I talked about earlier. We're working at going out on RFP for the sketching. And then we are doing, both with the World Conference, it's sponsored by TRB, which is with Velvet, and other people at TRB. Andrew is our lead at TRB, and then I work with our conference. So I was out in Breckenridge. We're moving to a higher level of coordination between TRB and National RTAP around for that conference, so that we can have continuity and we can take the information we built and get from you guys about the needs for training and information, and put that in one more avenue. Okay. We have our conference. Happens, the registration's out. Now, I want to talk about training, working with you on some training. Let's make beautiful training together. Because some of the things that we get asked are very much state issues. Like I was on the phone yesterday with Dwayne Weeks, who runs planning at FDA, and we're looking at doing a couple of training webinars about planning. Well, it's not just local planning, it's the relationship between local, regional, and state planning, and how are states managing that? What are different states doing? And Dwayne is all excited to work with us to get more information out about planning. So I see that as something I would like to work with you all on. Also, the vehicle procurement. Florida, who is not here, has a great spec that they have done that has both safety and reliability built into it. We are not going to get FTA mandating, this is the vehicle specification. But we, as people who purchase a lot of vehicles can say, the vehicle I'm purchasing better have these things in it, otherwise we're not gonna buy it. And it's amazing, a manufacturer told me that was what would make him create safer vehicles. Because he sells to Florida, and so he's already doing it. So it's not like, oh no, we can't do it. Well, yeah, they can't do it for Florida. So that's all, if you want to have safer, more reliable vehicles, that spec already exists. So the next webinar I want to do, and working with you, is how to do a statewide procurement using that spec. And we've got the Florida people lined up, so I'll work with Richard if you guys are interested. And if other things come up where you see you want to look at an issue and you want to talk to other DOTs about it, or it has an operational or training aspect, talk to Richard, talk to me. We love to work with you because we're here. I am nothing. I'm a convening and distribution hub. So if you need to talk about something with group of people, I'm happy to work on it. So those were some other ideas I had around things that we do. Thank you.
Any questions for Robin? All right.
Okay, we're gonna move on now with our federal policy and program updates.
Good afternoon. For those who don't know me, I'm Bruce Robbins. I'm the Acting Associate Administrator for Program Management at FTA. Personnel news, I don't know. If everyone knows, last week, Henrika Buchanan, who previously was the Associate Administrator for Program Management, has been named the permanent Associate Administrator for Transit Safety and Oversight. So she's been in that role acting a little over a year, and now she's permanently in what we call TSO, Transit Safety and Oversight. I wanted to introduce also a couple members of my team. Marianne Stock is the Division Chief for Targeted and Rural Programs, for those of you who don't know her, and within her staff we have Alon Flippen, who manages the 5311 Rural Program, Jasmine Clemens, who manages the Tribal Program, and Kelly Tyler has stepped out, but she was back there, she manages the 5310 Program. So we have many of our staff here, the program managers, we want to follow up with them directly. I know many of you may have attended some of the training sessions. So I have some updates from my office, the Office of Program Management. Henrika also wanted me to provide some updates about the safety program. She wasn't able to this day. She's returning to Washington today. The first couple slides are just about our 2019 competitive programs. Two of them we've already received the applications. The passenger ferry program, we have 20 applications for almost $100 million, and we have 30 million available. This is a recurring theme as we go through all our competitive programs. We always have many more applications than requests than we have funding. It's not on the slide because we were just developing the numbers, but for the low and no emission grant program, we've received 157 applications for $500 million, so just over $500 million, and we have 85 million available. The grant for buses and bus facilities, that notice of funding opportunity was published in May with applications due June 21st. And we have 423 million available, in part as was discussed earlier, because we have additional funding beyond the FAST Act level for the bus and bus facilities competitive program. But based on previous years, we can expect probably somewhere in the neighborhood of about $2 billion worth of applications. The Tribal Transit Program applications are due in July. We have 5 million available for that program. The TOD, the Transit Oriented Development Pilot Planning Grant Program. This is the only program that I know of in recollection that was actually undersubscribed, where we actually received fewer applications and requests than the funding available in previous years. So the authorized level is 10 million a year. We actually have 19 million available because they weren't able to allocate all the additional funding in previous years. But this is for funding related to planning, related to a major capital improvement. It doesn't have to be a project within the New Start program, but it does need to be connected to a fixed guideway. recently, our safety office has issued 2 safety-related funding opportunities. One is related to improving transit public safety, and the other is related to crime prevention and public safety awareness. $2 million available in each. I have a little bit more information, but those applications are due May 28th, which must be very close. It's only a week away. And then the research office published a Integrated Mobility Innovative Demonstration Program, a long title, 15 million available, but there's pretty much 3 components of that and 5 million for each component. There's 5 million available for the continuation of the, what we call the MOD, Mobility on Demand Sandbox Program, that was issued a couple of years ago. There's 5 million for innovative payments, and based on the discussion earlier about looking at how do you integrate the inner city and fare collections with others, that might be something you could consider looking at innovation within that program. And then 5 million is available for projects related to automation. So those are our 2018 competitive programs. We are looking this year. We were fairly compressed because of the shutdown. So we came back. We were at 35 days, and then we tried to issue the NOFOs. This is a recurring, shutdowns aren't recurring, but the late appropriations is a recurring issue that we face. And we are thinking of a strategy of what we can do in fiscal year 20 to try to develop a schedule in advance and maybe even issue some of the notices of funding availability before we have the appropriation, so it's more spread out over the course of the year and everybody knows up front when we plan to issue the notices. Some of the complicating factors is that I was just looking at the text of the House Appropriations bill that was issued today, and it's a preliminary draft that hasn't been passed by the House yet, but they're working on the appropriation process. But within there, there was language related to both the bus facility program as well as the low and no emission program that would put minimum grant awards. So I think for the bus facility, the minimum grant award would be $1 million, and the minimum low and no emission grant program would be $1.5 million. So, that's something that as U.S. states you may want to consider that how that might impact you. We often do receive grant applications. Normally from the states, they might be combining a application that includes multiple subrecipients, and so the award to the state DOT is generally greater than $1 million. It has multiple subrecipients, and that the proposed language wouldn't impact that. But we do at times receive applications from recipients, for example, tribal recipients who may be seeking to receive one van, and that van costs well less than $1 million. So we're looking at that language. We don't know whether the House will, their final version will include that language. We don't know whether the Senate will include that language in there.
So, sorry, just to clarify, Bruce, that's not anything that's imminent on the current solicitations you're talking about.
I'm talking about FY 20. I think. All right, looking in the future. There's nothing, FY 19, just follow the notice of funding availability that's out. There's no impact there. Sorry if I confused anybody, scared anybody.
I'm sorry, you said $1 million was the minimum grant for bus facility. You said low and no was
1.5 million. This is for FY 20. This is, you can call it an early proposal that's in the House, but I think it's something to pay attention to. But the reason I bring it up is it does impact also our ability to, issue a notice of funding availability perhaps before we know the appropriations, because if Congress is going to include provisions within that we're not sure how they're going to arrive, we don't want to necessarily issue a NOFO and then have to revise it or request updated submissions after the fact. But that is something that we know that we've heard over the years in terms of the NOFOs, the compressed schedules, or can FJ provide more certainty on the schedules, and we are working on it. Some of the programs, like the Berry program, the other programs, there's very little change with those over the years. I just flashed this slide briefly because it's already been discussed that we had the biennial state programs meeting and state public transportation partnership meeting in August, so we're pleased to be holding that. We're working on the agenda currently. I want to provide an update on the Coordinating Council on Access and Mobility. We've been working, our acting Acting Administrator Jane Williams has been in discussions with the Secretary's office about how we move forward with the CCAM in general. We have the requirements under the FAST Act to develop a strategic plan as well as the final report by the end of the FAST Act period. This is the general mission of CCAM is to really improve the availability, accessibility, and efficiency of transportation for persons with disabilities, older adults, and individuals of low income. And it's comprised of the department that you see there, established by executive order under the second Bush administration. What we've been doing is we've been doing a lot of outreach. We've been doing listening sessions. We've held forums. We've been working with at pretty much the staff level of the other agencies to really look at various aspects of the CCAM. So one of our the National Center of Mobility Management supported us by undertaking a survey looking at ways to, what are some barriers and challenges to coordinated transportation. And these won't be, this was done in November of 2018. We had a little over 500 respondents, all of whom will work at transportation or human service organizations. And we looked at making sure that it was comprised of all the CCAM member agencies. And it kind of flowed from the previous 2018 focus groups that we've done. And kind of to summarize the results, most respondents, look at transportation services as a way, coordination to improve the way to improve how they serve their constituents, the quality of the services. But they feel they face I'm sure you all know, the number of barriers to the coordination. Part of it is time, resources themselves to participate in coordination efforts, or lack of available transportation options, or really the cost sharing arrangements, the reimbursement structure. We really look here at the awareness. Most people are aware of the issues described. I think it was talked about earlier. Part of it is the how do we work? Often the requirements for working on the CCAM have only been put into the FTA legislation, and FTA is in charge with the Secretary chairs the council. We're in charge with, but when we reach out to the other federal partners, their interest levels have gone up and down over time, depending on administrations or staff within administrations. So keeping continuity, we made a lot of efforts near the end of the last administration on talking to HHS, and of course we had a lot of turnover, and we have to rebuild those relationships. So that's really where we're focused at this time, is continuing that type of effort. Just kind of talking about what we're trying to focus on is really, for years we've been using the figure that there's been over 80 transportation programs that across the government where transportation services are eligible. We've been looking at updating those lists to see where it's eligible. Right now we're over 120 programs. So there's a lot of, we've been looking at the Department of Justice, who has programs related to providing, where it's eligible, for example, to provide transportation services or related to the opioid epidemic, as examples of new programs. We're trying to eliminate some of the programs that no longer exist. But part of this is we want to compile all this because and as I think it's Charles was describing earlier, the ability to use the cost sharing from all these different programs to identify more specifically, as we understand within the 120 agencies, that we can start from the step of identifying the list of programs, and then from there looking at what are the cost sharing eligibilities, and making sure that it's more clear that in a lot of cases it is eligible to use this cost share. We're looking at trying to determine how much is spent on human services transportation. Many of these programs, they don't necessarily collect information on how much they actually provide for transportation, but we know the big ones. The math that's done for Medicaid, the math that are done, some of the veterans are, about $2 billion, I think, combined. And then talking again about the local match requirements. So we're working on that. We're doing the activities in the background, the focus groups, all this stuff, as we've been preparing to see see how we can, bring the CCAM together to kind of finalize the strategic plan and develop the report to Congress. So a lot of work's been done kind of behind the scenes as we work through that process. We do have a website that talks specifically about CCAM. And I'm going to turn over a little bit to what Henrika asked me to talk about safety. I think many of you, we all know that within the finalization of the Public Transportation Agency Safety Plan final rule that we did, they did try to make it not a one-size-fits-all rule. Ultimately, FTA deferred the applicability of the rule to about 2,000 smaller operators that would have been impacted. Really, what we found is that those operators posed a lower risk. That was a deferral, so I know in terms of the authorization that you're looking at what might need to be done in the long term. So the PTAS rule takes effect this July 19th, and transit operators have a year after that to certify that they have safety plans in place. Those plans don't have to be the fully mature safety management system, but it's where they are in terms of the plan. I'm going to go to some of the outreach that we are doing on the PTAS. We've held 18 webinars. The upcoming webinars are on May 30th on safety management policy and safety promotion. There's one on June 6th, agency safety plan frequently asked questions, and there's one on June 13th about safety risk management. So register for those webinars on FTA's PTAS webpage. We've held a number of workshops. We're holding PTAS bus-focused workshops in July 23rd and 24th in Atlanta, August 7th in Chicago, and August 20th and 21st in San Francisco. And I touched briefly on it earlier, which was the notice of the funding availability, but one of the Secretary's priorities department-wide is looking at human trafficking. And so within our program, we provided $2 million to look at the FTA, the Human Trafficking Awareness and Public Safety Initiative. And it's really designed to assist transit agencies identify measures to address human trafficking awareness, so campaign materials, other types of activities, as well as public safety more broadly. So there are kind of different NOFOs that you may have seen in the past. They're smaller amounts, but the applications, again, are due May 28th, 19. And then finally, FTA has reestablished the Transit Advisory Committee for Safety. It's called the TRACS Committee. This is an advisory committee that provides information to FTA on safety in general. The first meeting of the reconstituted TRACS was held this past March 26th and 27th. But they're really focused right now on assessing emerging technologies and innovations that might improve public transportation safety. And then some of the things that they're looking at in the future are evaluating employee reporting systems, roadway work protections, suicide and trespassing incidents. Really, these are the what's called the leading cause of transit fatalities. So the next TRACS meeting is in September. That's the update on safety. It's helpful to pause for questions now or turn it over to David. I think we can take questions, right?
I'll see if there's any online too, so please go ahead.
All right, Johnny.
Okay, just had a question about the PTAS and how it relates to SAFE, and evidently, the 5310 and 5311 are, I think, part of the deferred program, but for 5307 operators with less than 100, for 5307 operators with fewer than 100 vehicles, I'm a little bit unclear as to whose decision it is on whether or not those entities develop their own plan or have the state provide a plan, like a consolidated plan. That's something that I appreciate more guidance on.
Okay.
We have it at this time.
Yeah, we can be back with you with guidance.
Well, we can provide some peer-to-peer support here too. And so I think the general, you start with the assumption that it's on you. So for those under 100 vehicles in peak hour service, it's up to the state DOT in order to do those plans. However, each individual transit agency that fits in that bucket has the opt-out ability.
Okay.
And so that's what we're we're going, and actually the question I had, and I want to ask it of the room, so for the state DOTs that are in this room, raise your hand if the vast majority of your folks that fit this designation, 5307s with less than 100 vehicles in peak hour service, are opting out. And that seems like the majority. How many of you are writing a plan for your smaller 5307s? 1, 2. And then how many don't know?
We're still doing house, so we're starting.
Yeah.
If you answer these questions, people online can't see the hands, so.
Okay, so in the vast majority of the people in this room raise their hands that their 5307s are opting out. And there was a much smaller amount, and they seemed about equal, half don't know, and half are writing the plan on behalf of their smaller 5307s. So that's interesting, and Richard, I think that will help set our agendas in the future too about what peer-to-peer support we need to be giving each other around this issue.
I have a follow-up question to that. For those that their 5307 smaller agencies are opting out, how did you get them to opt out? We figured out a way to get them back out of our TAM plan, but we're really struggling with the safety plan.
What we did in New Mexico is we offered up some 5304 statewide planning money to provide the technical support to each of our each operator that this applies to.
How much did you offer them?
It was a small purchase.
I did the exact opposite. I went and said, and I actually blamed FTA. I said, I asked FTA how I should pay for this, and they said withhold their 5307. And so everyone said I will go and write my own plan.
Wait, you were able to withhold all of their?
No.
Oh,
Yeah, exactly.
Don, you threw FTA under the bus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, I made a joke, thank you.
I don't think Bruce heard that, I really don't.
I have a hand raised from Mark Sprick on, text dot. I'm gonna open his line right now. Mark, you're on. Your line is open, please.
Yeah, Richard, I just wanted to let you all know that here in Texas, we have 42 5307 agencies, and we're writing the plan for 41 of them. We've only had one opt out.
So it could be a combination then. Some can opt out and some.
Thank you, Mark.
Yep.
I guess the other part that I communicated with them is I don't think they're getting out of any work when the state writes the plan on their behalf. Because it's not, I still need to know their operating details and the details of their agency. And so a lot of the folks who initially said, oh, we want you to write it for us, WashDOT, didn't realize that we're going to be in their business, essentially, telling them what to do.
That's what they say about us.
Any other questions? Comments?
That was helpful.
I have a question. So Don, of yours that opted out, and how are they paying for their plan?
I haven't asked.
Don't ask, don't tell.
Wow.
I should add that we only have 5 agencies in New Mexico that this applies to. That's why our technical support contract is maybe a lower dollar amount.
All right, thank you. Bruce, yes, Mike, over there. David?
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for, thank you for having us here today. And it's good to see some of the Region 4 folks that I used to work with, the region. My name is David Schilling. I'm the Division Chief for NTSO, for Quality Assurance and Performance Analysis. I'm also here with Diane King from Milligan. And we're going to provide you a quick update on our FY19 State Management Review status, as well as I know,
Again.
I think it was Bruce's fault. There you go, one more question. this year's, reviews, the past figures from 18. And then, Richard and Charles asked us to talk a little bit about, procurement findings. Last year in the FY18 reviews, you'll see the statistics, but over 30% of the findings were in procurement. So we wanted to just talk about some of the top findings in procurement, and really, Diane and I want you guys to share best practices. So if you did get a procurement finding last year, kind of walk us through what that finding was, corrective action, and then how you, corrected that. So, and I think that would be helpful. But hopefully the way we're gonna try to, go with the presentation today, because I know some of you sat through us yesterday talking to you the whole time about the top 10 findings, so I'm gonna try a little different this time. So some quick updates. The FY19 state mentor reviews are now underway. You'll see in the next slide, we're doing 15 state mentor reviews this year. We were significantly delayed for two reasons. One was the government shutdown. The second one, we had a new contract. So we have a new triennial review and state mentor review contract that's going to last 5 years. So Diane is one of the contractors. I also want to recognize Robbie. RLS was selected as a contractor too. So I think she got the lucky draw to, she's doing New York City.
That means she gets to do one SB. Good for you.
So, the last couple of years we've been doing on-site workshops. And I believe if you're having a review this year, hopefully those have already been scheduled. If not, please let us know. But those have been a success in the past. We've heard from you, and so we're going to continue those not only this year, but in the upcoming years as well. One thing about the state management review cycle this year, we might actually extend out to next fiscal year, maybe even into November, just because we've got such a late start. So as you're scheduling your site visits, which I think most of them are scheduled, or you're working with the contractors now, it's okay to schedule them past September. So you don't need to contact us. It's okay, but it is okay. So everybody else pick November. Correct. The other issue with that is that some of our regional offices, it's hard for them to get travel funds in the first quarter. So we're trying to set aside some of those. We do want MTA regional staff to be at those reviews. So here's the list of FY19 state management reviews. Hopefully, if you're on the list, you know you're on the list. If not, there's a problem. One thing we did this year, MTA made a commitment to our recipients that we don't want to overburden you with several reviews. So we did a deconfliction this year, and Utah and Texas were having their state safety oversight audit this coming year. So we actually moved those two states out to FY20. So next year, it's going to be a big year for contractors, and for the state, I think we have, we're going to do 25 reviews. So that year, that cohort is always going to be a lot. So one thing I know folks that do our top 10 trial review findings yesterday heard is we have a new O-track. We've always had an O-track system within FTA. It's basically a database where we manage findings and corrective actions. As of today, since the modernization, it's really just an in-house tool. But with the modernization, we're actually upgrading it to the Appian platform. That's the same platform that Trans is on and that NTD is on. So how many of you have access to Trans and NTD? Or NTD? So we're planning to actually let the recipients have access. And I'm going to go over a few of the key areas where you're going to have access to it and get your feedback. Don't worry, this isn't happening anytime soon. We're going to have some time. You'll see we're going to actually, Richard is hosting us in July at a webinar to actually go over and get some user requirements and some feedbacks from the state to see what you're comfortable with.
Yeah, so on the July MTAP steering committee conference call, we usually do the first 10, 15 minutes, 20 minutes working on a technical issue, and this is it. Dave's our star.
So for the first time, FTA recipients will have access to this new system. They're going to be able to complete some key tasks, and some of those are, if you just start on your state manager review hat, the first thing you usually get from FTA is a hello letter. You're getting a state manager review this year. Please send us all this information. Well, I think that hopefully the new system will actually generate from the region, this letter to you. And then you'll click a link in that letter to fill out your operations profile. This system will be connected to trams and NTV, so a lot of the information will be pre-populated for you, which I think will be great. Of course, that can all be overridden or with your information if it's out of date or something. So that's the first thing the system will do. The system will also let you see in real time where your review is in the process. Okay, where are we? Who's our contractor? I'll be talking in the microphone. What is the site visit date that we've selected? All of that good stuff. The main thing though is when you're submitting your corrective actions, you'll be able to upload the document and also that justification right in the system. And that will then shoot an email off to your MTA staff person that it'll know that they need to review it. So it will be transparent. You'll be able to see where that is in real time. And then the MTA staff will actually be able to approve that or send you back some information in the system that, lets you know it's been approved, closed, or if they need more information. So we're hoping that this is going to be a great system and everyone's going to really like it. And if you know how to use trams or NTD, it's the same functionality. So we're targeting recipient access to the FY21 life cycle. So that's not till, you probably won't be using it until, I think, September of next year. So in between now and September, we have some work to do. We plan to gather some additional requirements. We're going to conduct demos and test the new system at various upcoming events. This summer, we're going to do a virtual focus group. If you're interested in joining this group, just shoot me an email. We will add you to that. We're also probably going to do a mini focus group with MTAP, so it might just be the non-states can do this focus group. We'll have two. We'll have one for the states and then one for the rest of the MTA receivers.
Isn't fiscal year 21 in 2 years?
So it will be fiscal 21 starts October 1st, 2020.
Right, but you just said starting in September of
Next year.
Oh, I see.
Sorry.
Got it.
So, and then the good news with the program oversight program, unlike trams, is that we have oversight contractors on call. So once you get a review, you always have that contractor. They'll be able to work with you and really provide you technical assistance in this new system. We're actually piloting it this year in-house. So our contractors are going to act like the recipients and put their information in, just like you check for any bugs, and then also be able to train the trainer. So when it's time to come out and for you guys to use the system, they'll be the experts and be able to teach you how to do that. We'll also be conducting training at our upcoming workshops, not the FY19 workshops, but the FY20 workshops, hopefully in the fall. We'll have more detailed training. Any questions on this new system? Or is anyone like, no? All right, well, good. No showstoppers yet. We'll wait till July.
Well, it sounds like it's got a lot of potential.
It does.
It'll be very helpful.
So, right now, when you send your corrective actions, it kind of goes into this black box with the region. You don't get, some regions might send you a receipt, some might not. But, so I think it really will help with the transparency.
And then I know health, especially for this year with the late start, a lot of folks were trying to find out where do I send my stuff once you gather it all together. With the new system, you'll be able to upload all of your information related to the SMR. So it'll be one housing place for everything, including doing your review, putting all of your documents, and then some of the things that don't expire will always be there. So we may not need to ask for things moving forward in the future from you. Less information for you all to gather.
And I also forgot to mention the reporting. You'll be able to run your own reports on past reviews, all of that good stuff. Some of the stuff that we really want to hit you in the focus group are user roles. Do all of your staff need access to the system? Does someone who needs to have approval rights to the system? Also notifications. The system can notify you to death. We don't want, if you have, the more notifications you get, the more you're going to set up a mailbox for just to go into. We don't want that. We want the system to be useful for everyone. So those are some of the things that we're going to do in these upcoming focus groups. So a couple more slides, and I'm going to turn it over to Diane. But here's our FY18 program oversight activities. You we had 18 state management reviews. Altogether, we had 298 oversight activities. We do about 300 a year, so we were about on par. And this just shows some statistics between for the state management reviews from FY16 to 18. We're still right around the 4 to 6 for average findings. 2 reviews with 0 findings, so nothing really crazy or changing. Maybe next year we'll have this down to maybe 3. That would be great, especially with all the training we're hopefully doing. So again, I mentioned here's the FY18 findings by review area. Procurement was 30%. So 30% of the findings of our state management reviews were in procurement. And the majority of those you'll see we're missing clauses. Shows how you guys guess. And so I'm going to turn it over to Diane now. We really just want to have a conversation with you on, please, if you did have a finding last year, this was one of them. What are some of the reasons, and what are some best practices you guys did?
I just wanted to put in a little plug we have a revised procurement pro, and that will get you your clauses. So if you're one of the people that, one of the states that's had issues with the clauses, get your people on procurement pro. It's free, and it'll get them the correct federal clauses.
Rob and I have been telling everyone that in our workshops too, so. I also am going to try to get a link to your procurement pro on our procurement website.
Yes.
So that's one of my action items.
Right on.
For the sake of people online, yes, Robin is encouraging people to use procurement pro.
And there's a link in the comprehensive review guide also, if you have the electronic version.
And it doesn't matter what size program it is, really. It does not matter. We are not going in there and vetting who gets in there. It can be any size program.
You also, MTAP also actually has a cost analysis worksheet. That is a tool that you can use in also your sub-recipients. That's on their website as well.
Good afternoon, everyone. Diane King with Mulligan & Company. As David said, we've attended a couple of these sessions, and we've talked a lot about top 5, top 10, here's why, and how to avoid it, and so on. And we wanted to do something different this time to sort of give you all feedback, about how you all go about avoiding some of these things, or even fixing them and ensuring that they don't become a repetitive issue in future reviews. So if you sat through yesterday, I'm not going to go through that today again, but what I will talk about is in the new FY19 guide. We've changed procurement up somewhat, especially in the area of the clauses, where that's the top finding. STA took a look at the clauses that are listed out in the guide. We didn't pull them out to say that they're not applicable. We reduced them from the triennial review or the state management review to focus only on those clauses that are required in 2 CFR, the uniform guidance. However, if you were to get a more specialized review, like a procurement system review, all of them still apply. So you still need to follow the SDA requirements, but and I think someone was talking earlier about regulations and right-sizing them and looking at, where's the risk? And so we kind of took a look at the guide, and I think there's some more efforts in PSO on the way to take a look at the guide and look at things with a risk-based approach to see, where are the real issues. And if you do have a finding, is it something systematic or something administrative that can be fixed? What is the value in just giving you a finding so you can fix it, or does it detrimentally affect your organization, the way you your operations? So for the FY19 season, we have reduced the amount of clauses we're looking at as part of the comprehensive review, but it does not mean that that we're not going to be looking at all the clauses where you can get a specialized review. So Procurement Pro, another plug, is a very good tool to use to assess what's applicable to whatever it is you're purchasing, in addition to the best practices manual that FDL gave a few years ago. So just quickly, on one of David's slides, he showed a list of, there you go, of the top 5 deficiencies, and specifically technically under state management review, we do have the missing clauses as number one, and I think a lot of that depends on the fact that we had so many clauses, so if you miss one, more than likely you might have an issue there. And this is probably another area I'm talking about where we're gonna look at, does it really matter if you miss, I don't know, what's the clause that's not a deal breaker? Any takers? Anybody remember? What would you say? Slide. Yeah, I mean, if it's in the slide, then I really have to have it. So those are the type of things that FDA is gonna be looking at. And so for this year, we sort of dialed it back a bit to look at those clauses within 2 CFR that are really detrimental to what you're doing with the federal dollars and procurement. But of course, you still need to check to make sure that you include everything that applies. So I think that's why that's the top of the list for missing clauses. I think FDA is attempting to address that. Hopefully, within this cycle, you'll see that number go down. Any thoughts on that? Would you agree? And hopefully, the folks that are up this year, I guess one of the things we like to tout in the old days, go to the checklist and the comprehensive review guide and look at your procurement. I mean, we tell you which procurements we want to look at before we even come on site. So not only do you get a bite of the apple, while you're doing the procurement, you get another bite of the apple when you hear you're getting an SMR, and then you get another one when we tell you what we're going to look at. So the idea is that you're going into the checklist within the comprehensive review guide, and you're looking at what we're going to look at. So you're, sort of stepping out in front of what could be a potential issue and determining or developing a policy to address it. Specifically for SAFE, I think the next one down, the insufficient oversight of sub-recipients, is a big one on the list, the 14% here. Because it's normally those folks standing in your shoes, your 5310s, 11s, folks that don't normally use SBA funds for everything, and so they may miss a few things here or there. One thing that we mentioned yesterday in the session that we had is SBA's approach now to doing our review of your recipients is that we're going to follow in your shoes. So instead of just choosing a recipient at random or somebody who's in close proximity to where you are, we're going to look at those that you've looked at within the 3-year cycle that we're reviewing, that FDA is reviewing. So our hope is that we're looking at how you're implementing your program rather than you feeling like, you're coming out to catch me on something that I may have missed or have not done. The idea is that we're looking at somebody that you all just went out to review, you've provided them the technical assistance, you've identified where the issues are, and they've corrected it. And so we're interested in how your program is working, not to find deficiencies.
That's some of the feedback we heard in Chicago last fall. Right. So we are implementing that this year, that we're only going to go after you're going to go out and check out your sub-recipients that you have already just reviewed.
What do y'all think?
So rousing
Ron, come on now.
I think that's good news.
So if you've got any open issues with any recipients you've looked at, you might want to go back and make sure you button those down.
Implicit in that, though, too, is that it's not necessarily just the same 5 that are in your immediate vicinity of your state capital, right? And so that we're in constant rotation and going to see.
They should get it by now, we're hoping.
Right, yeah. Okay.
Now we're going to decide by which are the best restaurants in the state.
We can get behind that.
So I think a lot of states, especially in the related to this particular deficiencies, a lot of states, what is typically your process in providing that technical assistance, that know-how up front for your recipient, so that you're not getting this issue? Because again, this is on you and your program, how you're managing and implementing your program, not necessarily on what your sub-recipient is doing. So the more you do up front is typically, as we talk about the smooth sampling process, the more you do up front in your program is what we're really looking at, to ensure that folks are getting it and they're doing, what it is they need to do. Because again, they're not doing this all the time. So any feedback on the type of technical assistance that you all are doing ahead of time, and even, during the oversight, if you're doing oversight, during the oversight cycle, how are you getting, some of these issues addressed so that it doesn't come back on you when FDA comes back out for review?
So during our oversight, we asked their procurement, and then that's when we're reviewing them. So they're uploading them as a pre-typed document, we also track, you know, the awards for capital projects outside of vehicle purchases, so we know who to, you know, the program managers know that this is an upcoming procurement, and so they're working with us from the beginning.
Okay.
Once the award is made, and, you know, we have clauses available to all of them in a public, resource place where they can, easily access them. So we provide procurement training almost every year at our annual conference.
So you do training annually?
Yes.
Does anyone do the sort of, follow you through your procurement process oversight or review where, you know, as you're going through it and every step I have, you submit pieces and portions of it, maybe the bid package?
Yeah, Mississippi does that.
We do that.
Mississippi does that.
How does that work with you all? Have you all ever had this issue come up in a review because since you've been doing that?
We haven't had any problems with the procurement. Of course, we're using procurement programs, and we also, any, procurement, we actually, they have a checklist. They have to send in all the procurement to us, and we have to give them a notice to proceed.
Oh, wow.
So it's pretty extensive. And, and when we do a reimbursement with our subsidy bill, we actually get all the documentation behind that, that purchase. So that's
$1 yeah. Anyone else doing it that way? And what are your resources for doing it? Do you have someone that's a specialist in that area that normally tackles that, or are you a jack of all trades? Everybody's doing their own. We have, project managers that are assigned each one of our training agencies, and they are doing the micro purchases and small purchases. And then we have one person that assigned in our office who just does procurement, and he's doing all the RFPs and IFCs. But he also is our resource specialist for anything between. So we made up forms for about every step of the way of everything that they have to do for procurement, and they're out on our website, listed like micro purchase, and you click on that, and whatever form you need to fill out for that, small purchase, IFC, RFP. And so then our project managers are reviewing that, you know, and we do not pay them out until we make sure that the procurement was done correctly.
So you did say you have a specialist in your office?
We do. So we have the project managers that are doing the smaller ones, and our procurement analyst that does the larger ones.
Does anyone else have the luxury of having a procurement specialist?
We theoretically have a procurement specialist, we just hired one, so, eventually.
For vehicles, we use our procurement department, the MoDOT procurement department. Yeah, and we got one for vehicles too. You just said there's state contracts.
Okay, got a lot of staff there. Good.
I don't know, 32 of them.
Good.
Wow.
Good.
So piggybacking off what Jody said about sort of vehicle procurement, does anyone, you actually allow your subrecipients to procure from beginning to end when they're purchasing rolling stock, or are they just following up your state contracts and then they're doing, you know, following step after that? Is anyone just going out full-fledged, or letting the subrecipients go out full-fledged and procure vehicles on their own?
No.
Yeah, the vast majority of our folks are buying off of our statewide procurement.
In Kentucky, the Kentucky Public Transit Association does a joint vehicle procurement. So all the agencies work together and do a joint bid. We work with them every step of the way to approve the specifications beforehand, approve the awards, but they actually purchase the vehicles themselves.
Go ahead.
Where we're really finding issues is when our subrecipients use a statewide contract for different, purchase different services like temporary employment, other than using our statewide, price agreement, which, you know, we centralize. We're finding problems with that, with those contracts, fuel purchases, anything, that the statewide contracts do not have the appropriate cost. So we're attempting to work with our state procurement office now because of this, because, it's becoming an issue. And
Yeah.
that's,
Debbie, I was just gonna say, we actually struggled with some of the same things, and we did create a workaround that we did jointly with our FTA MTA recipient is likely to buy off this contract, all FTA clauses apply. And, we were able to create a workaround that way.
It took us quite a bit of effort to, because the state procurement, they did not want to be bothered with the MTA requirements in the clause.
Right, yeah.
They just refused to work hand in hand. As a matter of fact, we lost an opportunity to purchase a number of vehicles because someone in the office checked off that, yes, meets all MTA requirements. And fortunately, we had a state audit done immediately after that, and the state auditor happened to look at the records. There's no indication that the two are consistent. So it saved us a lot of trouble.
Yes.
But it's frequently that the procurement offices at the state level just don't want to be bothered.
Yep.
Because federal highway does not require all of the same level of interest, and frequently, if it's not written by federal highway, we have to fight the battle ourselves.
Yeah, and, you know, that could become a big burden for small agencies. And, you know, asking for reimbursement for large subscriptions.
Yeah, usually motivation to opt out.
And you do the same with that. Yeah. So we're educating them, and we're being.
We were able to get our state office to use this kind of FTA clauses for vehicles, but not for anything else. We used to do like the computers and radios and that type of thing. And they found out that our state is required to do a geographical preference. That they must. So right there, it is, even if we would have had, a clause in there that said that, it would, they would.
So the next, you know, I'm gonna put this 4.1 and 4.2 together, which deals with responsibility, determination, and verification of the clauses. And this, verification of excluded parties. This is the SAM's one that you all may be familiar with from that perspective. So these two issues are in one question. It's really just verifying that your contractor is responsible. And so I think there's so much in here that you need to check. Use financial statements, do they have the right licenses, and so on and so forth. And, I think a lot of this occurs also on the subrecipient level, so you all get caught on it under insufficient oversight. But even directly from the state, I think just as a best practice, most states check to make sure, they have a very vigorous process to check to make sure a vendor is qualified or responsible. But sometimes there's some things that get missed in that process, and maybe it's because it's an FTA procurement. And so we see this rear its head a lot, especially on the verification of excluded parties. But I think it's, you know, the word has gotten around, and a lot of folks are addressing that now. There are many ways in which you can meet this particular procurement in the debarment suspension clause, having a certificate, having a clause included, or checking the stamp, which is related to that. So I think in the past, there was and, you have to do this and this, now it's or. So hopefully, you know, that helps to reduce that issue, moving forward. Any questions or comments on those? Anyone ever gotten those as an issue? That's why I feel like there shouldn't be any this year. Yeah.
No one volunteered.
And then the last one coming in at just 7% is the lobbying certification. A lot of states, and where I've seen it is a lot of states do that, power certification, that power tick certification, where you have, similar to the FDA's annual certs and assurances, you have a list of all the certs or requirements that you need your subrecipients to comply with, and you have them sort of sign at the bottom or check off. And sometimes it says, I will and I won't, instead of just checking one of them, and agreeing that you won't do it, as opposed to you will and you won't do it. So for the lobbying certification, either you're not using federal funds to lobby or local funds to lobby, or you are. And so sometimes in doing that power taking, one of those boxes do not get checked. Just sign off. Subrecipient will just sign on. Sometimes that gets missed. And so we see this rise up to the level of an issue during the review. It's not necessarily the state itself, but it could be one of the, you know, subcontractors or subrecipients that are doing this also. How do you guys typically do that? Do you have individual forms you're certifying as opposed to doing that power checklist or that power ticking on all the assurances and certifications?
The rest of them,
use a separate lobbying form for them.
We do the package, but they have to send as part of their annual application and have to send it, so everything that's in there is considered signed. So we don't have to treat one has to send the five.
Yeah. Do they do one application for all the programs?
They all do an application for whatever they're applying for, yes, if they're applying for both 5310 and New Freedom Activities, and they do an application for each one of those. And then if they're 5311, JARC Activities, they do a separate application.
That's a good question. So do you do it annually or just, your application cycle is biannually? Okay, it's annually. Is anyone doing biannual applications and therefore, biannual applications, therefore you're only getting it twice? Or once every 2 years?
We do it every time we program a grant. It's part of our standard procedure.
Okay.
And so, I think because of that, we do enough programming, even though we have a biannual grant program, every time we're updating grant work, we're signing, the forms. And so I think we're getting it that way. It's never been a problem in our review.
So another one that's going to come off the list.
Now, I have to admit, I can't remember everything we get in the previous. So you guys keep asking, you guys get a finding on this? It's like, I don't know.
So we're not talking about a whole bunch of findings, if you look at the next slide. Missing clauses, there were 5 findings. That's the actual number.
They're
They had a lot.
Yeah. Perspective.
Well, any other questions? We're hoping that, I know we are delayed this year with the reviews, but hoping it goes smoothly. Please provide us feedback. Myself or Sky Hearing, if you guys have any issues or comments or kudos, we're happy to hear it.
You guys are great.
And just before we forget, or before I forget, just David did mention, and I hope some of y'all may have received an email from me. ASHTO and FTA's Office of Program Safety and Oversight are joined together and put together a survey for members to review the reviewers. So as you're going through your oversight review process, you should consult, once you've gone through the process, visit the MTAP website. There's a survey there, in SurveyMonkey, that I think is pretty helpful. I'm hoping FTA finds it helpful. That will help us or help them improve services that are provided by the consultants that are going to visit you.
Yeah.
And because you can't, I've had it. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, hopefully next time, next year, this time, we're gonna, so if you haven't filled out a survey and you had a SMR this year, we're gonna gather all that information, bring some information back to you, maybe, show you where we're hopefully improved based on some of the feedback. And then also, I think next year we'll have a good idea of how TAM's going, so we can, bring you back some statistics and data from our TAM, section of the reviews.
And we reached out already to all states that have received FY18 reviews. And once FY19 kicks in, we'll be reaching out to those states as well.
Great.
I think it's safe to say that most of us can agree over the last few years specifically, the tone and tenor of the review process has made a significant difference in how effective we've been able to work this through. Because it's really been a relief to be able to go through the review and look for solutions rather than gotcha. And it helps tremendously when reviewers come in and share information about, in Michigan or in New Mexico, they are doing this. Have you ever thought of that? So while you may end up with a finding, perhaps, but you do get that kind of information to say, we're all here to just make this thing comply with what the requirements are. So we really appreciate that.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we get a 5-minute break before we continue. Everybody on the line, I'm gonna not share the screen anymore so you can see the screen currently. Back online in 5 minutes. Thanks.
Sounds good. Did we leave enough time?
And I guess the other thing is like, you guys,
Give me for our MTAP business meeting. But I would like, while we're doing that, and again, it's all about sincere communication. Recently, we had our customer satisfaction survey. And some of the results of the customer satisfaction survey, if you just read it, raises questions about the value that we seem to find in some of the things that we do in the MTAP network. Just as an illustration, today, just right now, fresh on your mind, the first half of today. How many of you think it's been beneficial? Okay. Because this is only gonna be as effective as you want it to be, so that we can use the time to get what you want to do. We don't necessarily need to go through the same formula each time. Because today, actually, we had some repetitions on money that's available, those kind of things. But we really want to get at, I wanted to have this kind of answer, I wanted to deal with this issue. So when we start planning for subsequent roundtables or our winter meeting or summer meetings, MTAP, we want to be able to have that kind of information to help us make these things worth your time and effort. And I would really appreciate it. So thanks. Okay, Richard?
Yeah, we're live.
All right. We got our business meeting done.
Our business meeting started.
All right. We're calling the meeting to order, right, Don?
Sure, we're calling the meeting to order right now.
All right.
And, first up on, our business meeting is, Bella.
Great, so, taking into the microphone.
Please.
You pulled your MTAP newsletter that's in front of you. I don't know if people have an electronic copy online, but they use it because it's written out. Go to page 10 and 11 in the back, and while I do have slides, I just want to encourage you to read the newsletter. So all the updates I'm providing for the research are in the newsletter. So, as you can see, the first, in the opening, we talked about the 5 policy statements that were submitted by the Council of Public Transportation, and they ranked their top 3, and the good news was those top 3 that you see listed here were selected recently, in the meeting, and they will go into these, projects. So you'll see that in the upcoming slides. In the next section, you'll see here are some important dates to keep in mind. And, you're saying I can use mine.
You can use, let's see if it works. There you go.
Oh, look at that. Okay, so I'll go to slides mode, but, and you can see the, next paragraph, there are some deadlines that you all should pay attention to. For the NCHRP, fiscal year, in the deadlines that are listed, they were, it was a typo, they were all listed previously. So, for example, NCHRP FY 2019 panel number solicitation release should be 2020 panel member solicitation release. That typo, I believe, was my fault from earlier submission.
Not you.
So, you can see that was released. Also, that the panel nominations for 2020 NCHRP are listed for June 15th. You can also see policy statement solicitation. So going through that list there. But I wanted to quickly scan through before I get to my slides and bring you to the active research that is taking place on 2065, because we have a guest here from Act 77, which is working to get lessons learned from KCOTs pertaining to the TAM and the safety plan. And we have about 60% participation in those surveys, and we're trying to get it to around 85%. So I want to quickly introduce you to PI, Kelly Sean from RLS, and give you a little update, and hopefully encourage you to reply.
Well, that, I guess I'll be begging, for those of you that, have not submitted, surveys for either the Transit Asset Management or the Public Transportation Agency Safety Plan. We look forward to your participation. We sent out about 2 or 3 emails to, all the states, encouraging them to fill it out so that they can be a part of the research. Like Bella said, we have about 61% participation currently, and we're hoping to get to at least 85% participation. So we have about 18 states that are left that have not completed both. There are 6 states that have completed one or the other survey. I am happy to send this survey to you if you know that you're a state that has not completed it, or you are anticipating a coworker that said they would complete it, and maybe they haven't. I'm happy to talk to you. I am happy to call out the states, but if this is not a forum,
you like me to call out the states that we're still looking for?
Yeah, you can.
Do it.
You can.
Yeah.
If you can handle the pushback, do it.
Okay, well then, starting it off from the great state of Alaska, we're looking for survey results from Alaska, Arizona, Colorado, Connecticut, Delaware, District of Columbia, Hawaii, Idaho. Illinois has completed the safety survey, but not the TAM survey. Kansas, Maine, Massachusetts, Michigan has completed the TAM survey, but not the PTASP survey. New York, North Dakota, Oklahoma, Rhode Island, and Utah. I was thinking that the PTASP was coming, but as of right now, we only have the TAM from Utah. So we look forward, if you've received calls from RLF staff, it's probably in regards to these surveys. And again, we're trying to make an effort to complete the surveys with full participation or close to it. Currently, we are compiling the data. We're a little scared to move forward and then have to backtrack. So we would like to get as much participation as we can, as soon as we can, and keep pushing the project forward. A brief description of the project or where we are. We have already conducted interviews with FTA on both programs and got some really good information. We have done some interviews with state DOTs and gotten a lot of great feedback. So all of that will be in the research program, and we look forward to delivering the next phase of that. So thank you all for your time, and I apologize for calling you out if I did. But we need that information.
Thank you. So I'll move quickly through the rest of it. So some other updates on the, what's written before you in the newsletter. Past 75, 76, 77, for similar reasons, have completed. Are extending when the final report should be released, and cleaning up the final data collection and final report. So you can expect 75 in September, 76 August, and 77, like you just discussed, Coachon in August as well. So I believe that's it. On page 11, I believe it's the second to last paragraph where it goes over NHRP 2122, which was the rural transportation issues research roadmap. And Charles is also the chair of that as well. Are you the chair of that?
Yes, ma'am.
Chair of that panel as well. They just completed their, at least they just released as the theme 8, which is the rural public and rural transportation themes and opportunities for future research, which I'll talk about in the next slide. So when you have more time, you can go back to the newsletter, but it's good to use the newsletter so you know that there was all the same information or additional information. We did it, but then it stopped.
Got it?
All right. So that was the research update. Now these are pertaining to how to write a problem statement. Now, did you want to talk about that right now, or did you have that broken apart in your business?
Well, maybe just stop for a second and ask if anybody has any questions on the update that Velvet provided. Seeing none, I don't see any reason why we can't just transition into the next part.
Well, just even before we get into that, we should just let folks on the phone know, as well as folks in the audience, we were pretty successful this year in terms of getting money for research through NCHRP. I think for the first time ever, $800,000 was dedicated by NCHRP. Usually we had set aside about $450,000 for research to be what is affectionately referred to as the 2065 project. Now we have $800,000 for 3 separate problem statements. B20, which is access to jobs, economic opportunities, and education in rural areas. B19, best practices in coordination of public transit and ride sharing. And A05, cost savings analysis of statewide insurance pooling for public transit. Each one of those, so a combined total of $800,000 for those 3. So thumbs up for public transit and NCHRP.
I think it's important to remember that the success of a number of continues to depend on how much we hear back from our membership. Because there were tons of just general ideas thrown out. And we have the most challenging part, I think, historically, has been getting the write-ups, really good write-ups with problem statements. In the past, we were guaranteed a certain amount. When we had 2065, we could kind of come up with the ideas, and we'll eventually produce a really good written problem statement. We'll tighten it up and up. Now, when you're in an open, competitive environment, you're gonna have to have substantive problem statements. And we can talk more about it with the 21-22 roadmap project. It's gonna help produce what we would think would be some very, very good problem statements that we can shop around for funding.
And also for the education of this group, as well as resolving this, I'm gonna make her aware, we've actually been reaching out to our membership because we're encouraging members to become members of these research panels. And we actually have some interest in the membership to become members of these panels. So for the B20, the Access to Jobs, TxDOT, Oregon DOT, Virginia DRPT, as well as possibly the North Carolina DOT, are considering submitting applications to become panelists. B19, which is the public transit ride sharing, Virginia DRPT again, as well as Idaho Transportation Department, will be submitting applications to become panelists. For the last one, the A805, cost saving analysis, a statewide insurance pooling one, so far that Montana as well as Indiana have expressed interest in submitting applications to be on that panel. Outstanding outreach to Kansas, Oregon, as well as Alabama. So we're hitting hitting our stride right now. We're just trying to get involved in this process because it's something that's new to us, right, Charles? We've never been involved in this, general process. So we're staying in a little bit. We also have two outstanding problem statements that were submitted to MTHRP that did not receive funding. One relating to healthcare, transportation, transit options, and discharged patients. That was one where patients get released on these weird hours. So what are the transit options? Serve that community. And the last one was right sizing the vehicles, rural fleets. Research policies that are going to be submitted to TCRP. Those are due in a couple of weeks. So we configure our problem statements. We'll be submitting those to TCRP.
Because we'd like to also take advantage of the possibility that there are pool fund studies that we can pursue that we historically have not done. And I don't know about how many of you have met with your research divisions or department within the DOTs. And we found out that it wasn't that difficult to get the research division to open the doors to consider something other than scouring effects on pavement. I mean, they've got this long list of all of these research projects they do on pavement and a lot of engineering technical stuff. But when you talk to them about something intermodal or multimodal outside of that, it's almost like I didn't think of that. And while they don't set aside tons of money, it's not that difficult, I think, to get a couple $100,000 in pool fund investments. We could do some really good research. Yes, ma'am.
Just as an example, in Ohio, over the last 2 years, they've gotten $600,000 in each of those years to do research for mobility transportation in the state of Ohio from their research division, and it was extremely easy money to get.
Yeah.
Surprisingly easy money to get, and it had a lot of flexibility involved with it as well.
We've got some really good experiences, Michigan, Ohio, other states, and that's just a couple that come off the top of my head, who've really done some really good work. And we need to look at some of those things, particularly as it deals with IT, as it deals with cost allocation, those kind of things, and not create a new problem statement, but follow on what's been done, and let's prove the value of, or improve on what has already been developed, that we can make it available to all of us to use. When you've got something that really, really works, but we want to see the applicability outside of your immediate environment, this is one of the best ways to do it. And I think that's what we're going to find ourselves benefiting from. I don't want to cut you off on that. No. Go ahead.
Well, since we're talking about panel nomination, I had those as the next two slides, but I probably should talk about them now.
Yeah.
Just back to the,
Working.
no.
Very good.
Okay, keep next. All right. So, this slide here goes over some information about if you're considering nominating yourself or someone else to be a part of an MTHRP panel. First, I want to draw your attention to the green, column there about, how to nominate yourself or someone else. Basically, you have to just complete a panel nomination application and submit the application by the deadline. So, important deadlines for you to be aware of are, June 10th, this year, for NCHRP synthesis study. Now, the reason why I brought up synthesis is although we were talking about the larger, the practice-focused research, synthesis studies also may address content that may be interested you, so you want to either hyperlink it as well as PowerPoint, which I think will be distributed after this. So you can click on that, review, look at the topics, and nominate yourself for that as well. And it has a completely different nomination format. Next, you'll see here is what we just discussed, and what Richard just reiterated that was on page 10, the three outstatements that were selected for these projects that were submitted by the Council of Public Transportation. So you'll see here the June 17th deadline is to nominate yourself to be a part of one of those panels. So if you want to be a part of one of the three projects listed on page 10 that Richard just read out loud, then you would want to make sure to look at the title and then nominate yourself by June 17th.
How many panelists do we usually try to get on one of these?
You said how many panels?
Right, so panelists.
Oh, panelists. I would say it ranges from 8 to 10.
Okay, and it sounded like you listed off 3 or 4, Richard, for each one that we have so far. So you're still looking for some more people.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Do not submit because you think it's like full or someone else or you already know submitted.
And this is not the source. We are not the only source of those panelists that will be nominated because they look for a broad range of folks to be involved. So, but it's still, we should push.
Industry, yeah, there's,
Yeah.
The panelists they run the gamut. It's just, in the past, we have not had, the reason why we're having to do this is because in the past, we had a set panel.
Yeah.
The 2065
panel was
which was just established, and it was there for years, so we got comfortable. Now we're in sort of that uncomfortable territory of having to look for state DOTs, to become members. So again, if you get a nudge from me, please understand that because we need to be proactive about this, we need to get into this process. There needs to be an annual thing, so thanks. Robin?
I have sat on a bunch of TCRP, not NCHRP, this project, and for them, it's a real issue, and they are always looking for people to bring that rural problem to the rural filter to a bunch of things. You think, hey, wait a minute, like I ended up on a sustainability thing, and so I really pushed to get a really small urban in there to talk about what kind of sustainability things they've been doing. And when we surveyed our group, we did a project, but we did a webinar with TCRP, and sustainability was like a big issue. Like 75% of the people were like, oh, we want to know more about sustainability. So we don't, and it's really a benefit to get you guys onto these panels, not just the NCHRP, but the TCRP panels to like say, hey, wait a minute, our people can't use that. We need to have it down to this level because they get that, but when you have APTA as the only transit people at the table, it sometimes reduces the usability or makes it more difficult for us to do research.
So, and the last hyperlink there, it provides you more information on how to volunteer. It's just the whole page. And to the left, on this table here, you'll see the general duties, which is essentially if you're selected to be a part of the panel, if you're considering nominating yourself, your job is really to provide guidance and technical aspects of the research. So, again, you'll be working to translate these problem statements into an RFP, and we'll release it, you'll work to select a contractor, and then you'll guide your research about. That's really what the first column is about. The second column is about, particular commitments, which means you have to be available to meet at least twice a year, one for a 2-day meeting, one for a single-day meeting. Generally in Washington DC, but those locations can change. And, another point is that if you want to be on a panel, you also are removing yourself from the ability to submit for that RFP. So you can't be a contractor and sit on a panel and then that wouldn't work out. And you also have to abstain from, working with someone who's developing a proposal for that RFP. So those are the two items in that column there. I think, I don't know if it's the back, see if it works on clicker. Yep. I want to go back to the, first line now that we're, okay. All right, and so, again, going back to your page 10 here, on the bottom left, it tells you the date that panel nominations are due. It's June 17th, because again, I just gave you the updated dates. These are submitted earlier, and then formal dates are, sometimes dates are modified. So the panel nominations for NCs are June 17th, just like in the slide. So we did want to take some time at this point to talk about, what does a competitive problem statement include? What should one focus on? So the instructions for how to submit a problem statement are revised each year, and those are released in June, so we're ahead of that time to have them released for the upcoming year. But expect it will be coming. Problem statements are generally due November 1, but of course, as soon as I give you the date, it's going to change, and I'll do all the updates like I do right now. So just June and November. All right. So I wanted to focus on these components here that I pulled out. Let's start with the basics, the title. So your title will need to communicate, what the research is about specifically. So, and succinctly. So in few words possible, communicate what you're trying to achieve, anticipating that everyone isn't going to be in the research all the time that you're doing this with the RNI. Second is the background. This is generally 1 to 3 paragraphs, and the 4 components that you really want to address is, what is the problem? What is the clear need? And how the product that you're proposing in this problem statement will be used and by whom to solve that, fill that need or solve that problem. So the problem, the need, and how what you're proposing will be used and by whom. They want to know that all of the can benefit from it. Your literature search and summary. So this is really to make sure that whatever you propose is not duplicative. And luckily, again, the Rural Research Roadmap has already got some great things for you guys to work with. There was also 2 that weren't selected, but I think you're considering submitting those to TCRP, which you could also just clean it up and send it to the next cycle for NCHRP. So the literature search summary is helpful in proving that this is an issue. It's building upon work that has already been done, and it's not duplicative. And you'll note here that I listed our research database, or our research tool TRID here. And TRID also includes the research and product database. So you can also know what's in the pipeline to make sure you're not duplicating something. You want to make sure to, at minimum, use that link there, TRID, look up 3 topics, and make sure that it's not within the research and product database.
And TRB is also, as staff, that's also very helpful.
You can also
Doing
use access.
literature. So you can have, having doing this last round, we asked TRB to help us with this. They did a fantastic job.
Yeah.
2 fantastic. Really detailed. They're good. Very good.
You can also contact our librarians. They're underutilized, and they actually like when people ask them to use their talent in research. So you can contact them. The last link I have here is actually a publication that was released a while back that says, how to do literature searches and literature reviews for transportation research projects. So you can just use that and move on that, and that should get your research summary out of the way. Your research objectives should also be succinct, and it needs to describe the outcomes and expected final product. So you might want to look at the types of products that have been released before, but you can create them what's helpful. Guidelines, text methods, manual processes. You really want to be clear on what the product or what is the major outcome you want from this proposed research. You also want to demonstrate that the objectives can be achieved in the estimated timeline
way to do that is, again, doing your literature summary, and finding out what's been funded before and how much it costs, and things of that nature. I don't think anything below 200,000 standard for an MTAP project. They're pretty sizable, so I would just know that it's probably not going to be less than 200,000, whatever you're thinking. Implementation and planning. So, you also want to think about when you're writing your problem statement is what type of support state DOTs may need to implement these results or new supplies that you're proposing. And again, incorporating that to make sure that it's feasible, that it would be used, it's something that would be produced and it be used. You also want to consider some activities that would be used to disseminate the product and implement it. This is not a mandatory thing, but this definitely helps people, around the table with a lot of competitor products understand or proposals understand why this problem statement is going to select. So I wanted to take time to focus on implementation and planning and how to incorporate that in there. Next, of course, an estimate of problem funding and the research period. Again, I would go back to the literature search summary, looking at previously funded items. But essentially, you want to make sure that the estimated amount of funds needed to accomplish the objectives for the research, but also any of the implementation, initial implementation items that you included in the problem statement. So if you say this product would be great, and and say DOTs would implement it in this way, you want to make sure that your budget helps that at least the initial implementation. And the last thing I really wanted to point out was the urgency and potential benefits. So you want to talk about, the benefits of the project, if it's successful, what would happen, explain how agencies would benefit, and generally there's one person that, I didn't go over everything in the problem statement, these are the key areas, but generally you have to identify at least one person who's going to be accountable for the problem statement. So this is an opportunity for that person to continue to describe how it would be used in their particular agency and other agencies if they want to give a clear example. But you can also talk about the negative impacts, like what are you going to lose if this problem statement isn't funded. So those are different ways to kind of, have them look at the diamond from multiple angles about why it's really important and how it fits. Another component is, I think I've been here, but I can't do that far, is really making sure that what you propose shows a benefit to state DOT's strategic planning. So I mean, that makes it a lot easier to select the project as well if it's easily mappable to the strategic plan, which if you look at the next slide.
I'm sorry.
That lets you know how it's going to be reviewed. So actual special committee on research and innovation, RNI, is the governing body, and it selects the project based on 4 key factors. So one is value. So how well the research, again, address critical needs and strategic objectives of state DOTs. I said strategic plan, but strategic objectives. Number 2 is the likelihood that the objective can be achieved within the proposed timeline and funds. Again, that literature summary will really help you prove that, validate that. The likelihood that the research will produce implementation-ready products. So knowing really clearly what you want out of it at the end is also very helpful, whether it's a guidebook or something of that nature. And lastly, the likelihood that the research will be implemented by the state DOT, which again goes back to the implementation component that I broke down. So hopefully that's a strong outline to begin with there. I thought about pulling out an example of one that was ranked in the top 10, but that would be, I would just be printing that out and sending it over, and one that was selected, top 10 and selected, because there were some that were in the top and then not selected. So.
One of the interesting things I found from this being part of this NCHRP process had to do with implementation, and really if you're thinking about what is the eventual deliverable that you want, if you're thinking about doing a research project and you're thinking about, okay, well, what is the actual deliverable? Some people were taken aback by, well, you I want my deliverable to be, this website, and, it's going to do X, Y, and Z. Well, NCHRP was
generally don't focus, that much on policy issues, generally. You've got some constraints.
So this is what the, nomination page would look like. That's all it was, to make sure that people knew that it was very, different. So if you nominate yourself for, if you went through the link and not looked at some synthesis project and felt you want to nominate yourself, it would look like that blue portal that says synthesis nomination. And you can see the difference in the front one, which is the announcement for the panel nomination for the passive research, for MTHRP, which you have to follow those particular instructions. So although it's still MTHRP, there's different ways to nominate yourself, because the panel operates different, and produce different products. Also, hyperlinked on this page are the projects that were selected for fiscal year 2020. So if you click on it, you'll get a full list for MTHRP project, not MTHRP synthesis, but MTHRP project, and you can go through that.
I know you said we gotta keep going. One of the things, I don't want me to belabor this, but we've historically run into the issue that research would take so long. It would take anywhere from 18 months to 24 months from the time a problem statement was drafted before we would see the results of the research, and maybe even longer before it was published. So we've got to find a way to develop research problem statements and issues far enough into the future that it's going to be of real benefit to us. We can't come up with the short-term solutions. We'd love to have research on that now so it can inform the discussion 6 months from now. It's just not practical that it's usually going to work that way. But one of the things that, thanks to Sharon Edgar from Michigan, the approach was to find a way that a lot of the information that was being uncovered during the research process could be shared with us as DOTs prior to there being a final report issued. There are some protocols, we can't just start sharing information, but all of the information, but those are the kind of things we need to keep in mind. That's it.
All right, thank you guys. All right, are we ready to move on to the next product or topic? So the next topic was training needs for staff, and I prompted you guys at the beginning to be thinking about this as we went through this. A smaller group, some of which are here today, I believe both Carrie and Shirley were on the call, and with anybody else in this room participate in that discussion. So first thing I want to do is promote the STA 101 module that is on the MTAP staff website. Anyone who has new staff coming on board, the first thing I do is I send them to that and say, here's how you work with STA 101 style, and I'll even send it out, to my division occasionally and say, hey, just as a reminder, you can go back and look at this. And so the first thing we did was kind of look at that FTA 101 module, which was recently updated, right, Richard? Yeah. And so that, and had a conversation about what we like about the training module, what's missing, what could be our expectations for future training, and how can MTAP fill that gap? And really, it's that last sentence that we're thinking about. And I'm not calling on them yet, but Carrie and Shirley, be prepared to chime in here with any of your thoughts from the call. Everyone agrees generally that the existing module, really does fill a good gap. However, it's not immediately clear, and you kind of heard it from some of our presentations today, that we're not getting, let's not do this with triple negatives. It seems as though most of our additional training needs are being met by RTAP, by NTI, which is funded by FTA. A lot of people mentioned you working with the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee transit course. But all of those things kind of reiterate the point that, gosh, a lot of the more specific, the 200, 300, 400 level courses that we may need for us and our staff may already be covered. And so that if we were to do a new training module to complement the work of FTA 101, it should be something that's not already covered somewhere else, that is from a state DOT perspective, because we think that might be, well, first of all, that's what this group does, right? It's the state DOTs. and that might also be where a gap exists. Carrie or Shirley, anything you want to add at this point? Or Andy? You were there too, sorry.
Andy came on late, sorry.
So we'll recognize her later. Robin?
My work in state DOTs and then working outside, coming in, is looking at state roles and, sort of understanding where you have discretion, where you don't within the federal program too, because a lot of the new program managers that I've seen, from some of the states that are new, don't understand, well, 5311, you may walk into a program that looks like this, but you can change the percentage, and so, then you do discretionary versus, allocated. You can, and the state also can take different roles as far as information, and each of you do, but a lot of that stuff, I think, is held within the state, is the understanding about how your state takes this role, but is, do you sort of you think about, oh, well, every state does this, and you're like, no, they don't. Right. And so really helping see some of those variations, I think that's where you get into the graduate level stuff, where you're saying, oh, why is that program every other year, and our program is every year, and so we just spend all our time writing grants. Right. Why isn't everybody like that?
So to sum it up, it's basically, where's the wiggle room within the federal programs that the state does? So there's some stuff, you're right, that's from on high, and we have to do it this way. But frankly, the majority of our book of business, we have discretion. Yep. And in the way we, that's a really interesting idea.
And I think, thinking about what your goals are, sort of assessing what the needs are in your state. Because if you have a lot of state money, maybe your federal program can be used to seed innovation and discretion, the discretionary, because that's great. But if you don't have a lot of state money and your program is discretionary, you're basically creating the only reliable money funding that's available. You're creating uncertainty. And so it's really hard to get transit started, going, developed, seed money for new systems, because they're like, well, it'll be gone tomorrow, why should we do that? And literally in Oregon, I had the state managers tell me, well, we don't want to do that, because if we did that, then people would come knocking in 18 months and want us to continue it.
God forbid.
Like, yeah.
Thanks, Robin. And so I do want to go back to our folks on the call and see if you guys have anything to add.
I think on the call, I mentioned this too, that, the resources that we have, and you mentioned it too. I know that we haven't fully explored, the RTAP, option. In fact, I just got a sheet here on how to become an administrator for my group. Yeah. So I know we had talked about, kind of inventorying what we have and maybe making links, or more links, I guess, to that information from, the MTAP website.
Actually, I was giving kudos to, the National RTAP, because they do have such a training resource that, we've tapped in, and I think we can do some more. I remember Richie talking about it, instead of going through the cost of, updating, the MT101, there are other resources that we can use instead of having to go through all the process that we did. I think that was a good option. University of Milwaukee, places like that. I really like the MT101. And I think it's a real good resource for those beginning, people that are coming in. But there are so many other resources, I think, that we really could tap into some things.
Well, as long as FTA 101, as long as we have it, it is a useful tool.
Yeah.
Every time there's a new surface transportation bill, programs get reauthorized for another 6 years, we'll have to, as long as everyone likes the FTA 101, we'll have to constantly revise that. But that's, every 6 years. It's just a matter of, just to emphasize what Don had said, what is filling the gaps? What is there a next step? I mean, I'm not here to say I'm interested in spending, state DOT money, on something that is not necessary or not going to be used. So, if there is gaps, what are they? I mean, I'd love to hear from some folks around the table.
So let me stack folks.
Sorry, you were going that way.
I'm the facilitator.
I'm sorry.
And, so I'm going to stack you, Robin, so you hold on for a minute, since you already talked. We'll go to Angie, and then the other folks about their, training needs.
There, I just wanted to mention, there's one other resource also out there, it's the Easter Seals. Carol,
Right.
she comes into our state, does quite a few trainings. We had Robin and Carol at one of our conferences, they did a great job. So we got right,
Kindergarten, right, kindergarten.
Yeah, if you look up Easter Seals Project Action.
So there is another great resource right there too. Kind of agreeing that, you know, I don't know if it's something that we need to put any more money into it right now. As far as, you know, maybe let's look at the other options that are already out there. There's one thing we did in Michigan, and I know this isn't an option in all the states, that we actually had one of our project managers write an MTAP 101. And I mean, it took her about 10 months because she was doing it in her spare time, you know, and then it's 10 modules in there, but it's how MDOT actually administers a program. So it's how we administer, you know, because that's what we were just saying. We do an annual application, some people do too, you know. We do ours is really goofy because we have 100%, we match all of their federal dollars. So we always have to wait till later in the year till we can do our program, because we have to make sure that we have enough state match to match all their federal dollars. So, you know, every state is a little bit unique like that, and FTA gives us a little bit of flexibility. You know, for our procurements, FTA says, you know, you have to have 2 quotes, and we say that you have to have 3. So, you know, you can be, you know, more stringent than FTA, but you can be less. So I think that, you know, as far as at the federal level, I think there are a lot of other resources out there right now.
Very good. So quickly around the room, what are the training needs that you guys have a gap for, that you just either have employees looking for training, you have development plans for your folks that they're missing something? What are your needs that you don't think are being met?
Or if you're a staff person, what do you think you need? You know, if you're not necessarily the lead in your office, what do you think you need? Anyone?
All right, and I'm gonna go back to Robin. And, you know, just to build up one of the points Andy was making about how you, MnDOT, I think you called it, right, 101, for your internal. We're kind of doing something similar, kind of going back to what David was talking about before, where now you submit all of your policies and procedures, and they review them. We're kind of trying to do something that meets both purposes, both explains what we do internally for our staff, but also use that as our communications device with FTA about how we do our policies and programs. Robin?
Okay, so we work with MTAP, we do the list of people and connections with every, but, you know, we've been doing all this, e-learning stuff, and we just updated our transit manager toolkit. It might be something where we could work with the Transit Manager 101 and look at getting it as an e-learning course, bringing it onto the e-learning and linking it into our e-learning system, because you guys are the nerve center for rural transit. Yeah, you manage all of that. You are the MPOs for those rural programs, helping them get their planning done, their data, and so I think that looking at ways that we could help you guys update it. I mean, that's a potential RTAP project as far as I'm concerned. And so to think about that maybe in the coming year, and it would also modularize it and make it easy to access, not just as a reading thing, but maybe more interactive too. Because that's one of the things about the trainings, the online trainings. One, it would give you some familiarity with it, and so you would be more comfortable helping your grantees use it. But it also, it makes it easier to update and to manage. So that's another idea. So that's.
I have a comment. So our training was related to, we would have a consultant come out and do our oversight, produce a report, and our program managers were responsible for the follow-up on the reconciliation for the deficiencies and the recommendations to close everything out. Oh my gosh, what a huge learning curve that was, right? They're supposed to be reviewing a compliant procurement policy, or, you know, a compliant drug and alcohol policy, or they were looking at, you know, just anything like that, right, for a finding. And so large of a learning curve. And so we had to bring the consultants in for the follow-up. And so now what we do is we do like a go-to meeting with the consultants and the program manager, so that it's sort of like a learning environment, in solving and reconciling these deficiencies of, oversight reports. So, you know, the training would be any category that would be involved in the oversight. Yeah,
So the key part though is where's the gap? And so we know there's that annual drug and alcohol conference and then the mandatory training,
right,
that everyone
right.
does. So is there something that's missing that your staff needs that they couldn't get from somewhere else? Okay, I think we need to move on to our last,
So I mean, just end this discussion, it's just food for thought. It's something, again, we started the discussion with a conference call, steering committee members, sort of this informal panel. We moved it to this venue to see if there were people we don't usually hear from who give us additional thoughts. And then again, this is sort of, an ongoing discussion. If you haven't taken the FTA 101, it's really a narrated PowerPoint presentation with a quiz, with an online quiz. So it allows you to sort of interact with the software. You know, it won't let you move forward to answer a question wrong, or it makes you go back and take the test over again. You can constantly revisit it. So the idea behind, we need to do something in more detail. We need to do a 201. So a 201 that says what? That's also food for thought. Please keep it in mind for those around the table, and send thoughts my way. You all know how you feel after. So.
Yeah, somewhat related, one of the research projects that we're underway with is task 80, it's listed on page 11, capacity building options for state DOT transit staff. These are some of the kind of things that we're looking at so that we can get really good information on how to be more efficient. The old terminology, works smarter rather than harder. And there are a lot of areas when we were doing this that came up. One of the things was, how can we best incorporate automation into what we're doing? And things are moving so fast. I mean, they're changing so fast that we've got to be able to take advantage of that. We can't, some of us, like some of you folks who are really fortunate, we can't have a specialist for every area. We simply are going to have to do smarter rather than harder.
All right, thank you. Our last topic for the day, really quickly, we mentioned it before, but we'll mention it again, is everyone got a flyer for the save the date for the summer conference. Again, I find this to be a very valuable conference, and you have all the right people in the room. This is the year that FTA puts it on. Next year, it's done as a partnership, right, Richard, between APTA and MTAP and
yeah, so the odd years they're hosted by FTA, it's the hotel, it puts together the program, but in consultation with ASHTO and APTA and CCAA. So they're going to come out with an agenda hopefully sometime in the next month. Registration website's available, so please register. It's a free conference, so please register. All you have to do is pay for your air flight and your flight and your hotel and your food.
MTA conference.
Or coffee, which is awful. But hey, it's a free conference. But every year when we do this, we host ASHTO, host that sort of a half-day breakout session.
Well, yeah, and so the idea question to the group is, what are the things you want to talk about this summer? And there are some obvious ones, right? And so I quizzed David on his way out of the room is if there's any state management reviews that have done, and there are TAM findings. We want to know what those are, because this is going to be the first year we're doing reviews with TAMs in them. And actually, I'll even look around the room if any of our folks are going to be having a review before this summer. If you want to be prepared to come to that meeting and share your experience, especially around that topic. Another idea I had, again, similar to one of the things we were talking about a little bit earlier, is do we need to do some peer-to-peer technical assistance around the PTAP? And similar to when we were rolling out TAM a few years ago. We tried to find 3 states that were doing it slightly differently and had each one of them present on how it was going for us. So that might be something that's useful. Other thoughts that people have about things that they would like to discuss this summer. Andy?
NTD findings,
NTD findings.
we have common ones. I don't know if anybody else has found that we have, but we really struggle with them right now.
What's the process of reconciliation? The validation.
Validation.
We seem to have just validation.
Yeah, we usually have like 125, and then we think what we fixed, and then they come back, still got 15, then they come back, still got 20. I mean, it's just, we don't get done with ours until, we shake clearance line. So I just wonder if there's.
You know, there was a research proposal kicked around that the NTD process should be expanded to incorporate all federal programs, so we would have to use something like NTD for everything that we get funded for. Pray for the person who wrote that, please. No.
Other ideas, topic ideas for this summer. I think those are 3 good ones. I came up with 2 of them.
I mean, everyone has been at this conference for 3 days. Is there something that you've heard that you said, well, yeah, we should just drill down into that one? I mean, again, it's that half day is kind of a generous thing. It's sort of the amount of time we have similar to this meeting. We have about 3 hours in the afternoon on one of the days, and we get to talk about whatever we want. But the other idea I had is that we have the Council on Public Transportation, our new chair, Roger Millar, Don's boss. He's going to be presiding over his first meeting, so we're kind of also thinking about ways that we're going to try to get him involved. Maybe we'll have him do a presentation on something. But again, it's this room. What have you seen? What have you heard over the last couple of days? That would make you think, yeah, we should drill down to that issue. That's something that's if given 30 minutes of time, we can really learn something as opposed to, like you did here, talk about procurement. You already had, Diane, you had David here yesterday talking about all the top 10 findings. We've had that presentation, a couple of times. It's just now a matter of, what have you seen? What can we drill down into? That's all. And I'll be open to receiving emails from everyone. We'll, of course, reach out via email asking the same kind of questions. But since we have a group here, it's always interesting to hear what have you seen here that we can learn from. That's a question, really. Anyone?
And today's not the last day. So if you think of things, we can either share them via email with Richard or myself, or at upcoming MTAP calls. We can certainly bring them up again there. All right, we are 7 minutes over our agenda.
Any closing remarks, Charles?
I think this has been good. Again, we want to encourage you to be very honest and forthright in how you want to go, where you want us to proceed with the DOT Roundtable process. We want it to reflect what you consider the best investment of your time. So give that some serious thought, and through Richard or Don or myself, just give us some ideas. And we look for, we've been very successful in some years of having state DOTs decide, we're going to make presentations. We're going to give some ideas. Here's some wonderful things we do. And they can work through it, and we can question it, we can learn from it. So that peer-to-peer is one of the aspects I think that's always going to be a good thing for us. But we want to look at that. Thanks. Everyone
online. Have a great meeting.
Yeah.